Hello once again. So this is my third topic, release from the organization under human resources management. Once again, my name is Edward Nubla. So introduction, when we talk about release from the organization, it's about when an employee leaves an organization. So sometimes it can be voluntary, sometimes it's because of retirement, but sometimes it is because it is involuntary, right? Maybe because of redundancy, misconduct, or even incapability. So we will discuss them along the way. So redundancy is when an organization deems that an employee is in excess of what is needed or demanded. So it's also like retrenchment. So or it's another form of downsizing. So it is important, to know the difference because serious business losses is indispensable in retrenchment. Sometimes the business really need to retrench because they are losing money, and it's a way to cut costs. Right. So redundancy happens if the employee's position has already become in excess of what the employer's enterprise requires. So perhaps someone can do the job of two people, and so they might want to let someone go in order to cut costs as well. So that is redundancy also. So sometimes because the organization sets a higher performance standards, they do not retain those that cannot meet those higher performance standards. Eh, Sometimes disciplinary action may be taken, but if it's properly administered, no, uh, it can be a way, to let people improve themselves. So to give people the chance to develop further, and perhaps they can prove that they can meet those higher performance standards in due time. Right? So sometimes there is voluntary release, right? And sometimes people go on their own because they found a better job, a higher paying job, or maybe because they want to relocate somewhere. They want to move to another location. Or some of them might be dissatisfied, no, with the way they are treated. Some wants to retire early, right? And some wants to volunteer for redundancy, maybe because they are being pressured or because they want the money that they will get because of voluntary redundancy. So, um, letting go of someone is perhaps one of the most unpleasant tasks that an HR professional would undertake. And some of you who are in human resources might be able to relate. HR professionals are the ones, who are being asked to let go of someone. Okay. And but no, the HR professional can make this a little easier on those affected employees. No? Perhaps what they can do is to ease the process, no, and analyze employee reasons for leaving the organization, and make it a positive aspect of the function's involvement in organizational release. So letting go of letting go of someone, you can also learn, no, what and why they wish to leave, and perhaps that can be used, to improve the organization as well. So, what are some of the ethical and professional considerations? Um, when you are doing a downsizing exercise, you might want to minimize the distress and the trauma. being let go is already difficult on the employee's part, no? But you as the person in charge perhaps can make it a little easier and lighter. HR professionals may also want to press for policies and actions that will minimize or, if not, eliminate involuntary redundancy. So perhaps there are ways, no, to avoid involuntary redundancy, and perhaps the human resources can look for or formulate policies that might help. So they can emphasize the need to handle redundancies sensitively, uh, because sometimes, no, we forget that the employees are also people and who has families, no, and it might become mechanical to let them go. However, it should be emphasized that these redundancies should be handled sensitively. People need their jobs. Uh, so HR professionals should ensure that proper redundancy procedures, including those relating to consultations, are followed, including the codes of practice and legal requirements of redundancy. Uh, So similarly, no, professional approach to discipline means that specialists should ensure that there are disciplinary procedures which conform to the codes of practice. So, um, like in the Philippines, no, we might have a human resource code of practice, and likewise the legal procedures, no, in when we are going to have disciplinary procedures. So, uh, we might want, no, to train our managers to communicate these procedures properly, no, and how these should be applied. Uh, Ethically, HR professionals should do their best to see that the people are treated fairly in accordance with the principles of natural justice, meaning employees should be treated justly, right? No matter what happens. So, downsizing is one of the most demanding areas of people management. It happens more often than you think, right? So, some of the responsibilities of HR professionals could be the following to somehow avoid redundancy or handle redundancy properly. So number one is to plan ahead to achieve downsizing without involuntary redundancy. Okay, so perhaps what you can do is start asking those that the company might want to let go if they wish, no, to voluntarily leave or resign. Uh, um, so that's voluntary redundancy. That's just part of planning ahead, or at least perhaps know about it if it's possible, or if it's legal. Uh, Advise on and implement other methods of reducing numbers without redundancy. So there might be other methods, and perhaps HR professionals can look into that. So encourage voluntary redundancy if other methods fail. All right. So this time encourage na. Earlier I said no, just look for possible volunteers, but now encourage if other methods fail. Okay. Next is to develop and apply a proper redundancy procedure. There should be a legal procedure, to redundancy. And then payment arrangement for releasing employees should be dealt with properly. And finally, methods of handling redundancies should be well managed. So sometimes people might accept voluntary redundancy because there is a suitable payoff. They will be getting usually a big amount, no, for voluntarily leaving the organization. However, there are disadvantages. Some of the people you don't want to go, might resign because of this. Perhaps what you can do is, if you want these people to stay, you can offer them a loyalty bonus. Uh, all right. So how about outplacement? So outplacement is the process of helping redundant employees find other work or start new careers. So this involves counseling. Uh, uh, Sometimes it's offered by a specialized agency who is or who are experts in outplacement counseling. So if you are forced to resort to redundancy, so the procedure should have three aims. Number one, treat employees as fairly as possible. Of course, it should be just, you know, when letting someone go, especially because of redundancy. Next is to reduce hardship as much as possible. So make it as easy for them as possible. Don't make it more difficult. Okay? It's already difficult that someone is being let go. So don't make it even more difficult. And finally, still protect the management's ability to run the business effectively. You still want the organization to run efficiently. Management, of course, will want to retain its key and more effective workers. You don't really want to let go of those people. However, labor unions, might say that it should be last in, first out. So that becomes a challenge. Uh, that becomes a challenge. So that might take negotiation and collective bargaining agreements. Right. So, in handling redundancy, first, there should be a fair redundancy selection policy. So a policy should be in place. Okay? Next, legal requirements for consultation must be met. So surely there are consultation and there are legal procedures to that consultation, and those needs to be met. Okay? So during these consultation meetings, uh, you must explain, the reasons for redundancy, number one. Number two, the steps that has been taken or planned to reduce the problem, meaning you have to explain that we have already done this, and yet we still need to let go of some people, okay? And the pay, for being included in the redundancy. So the time frame should be indicated, and the criteria for selecting redundancies should be confirmed. So when would that happen, and who would be included, should be confirmed. Uh, uh, for credibility, it should be the an executive or the manager who should announce the redundancy in person, right? Right. And this announcement should state how individuals will be notified as soon as possible after the general announcement. Right. So, how these people who will be identified will be notified, right? Including how payments will be made and how they will be assisted if they are going to look for work. uh, Okay. So sometimes if it's a huge redundancy, a lot of people will be laid off. The media will have to be informed, and a press release will need to be prepared. Oh, why is that? Because people will speculate. People will hear about it that a lot of people are being let go. and some people might think that you are closing down, right? So to avoid that, to avoid gossips, no, you have to prepare a press release and tell the media that this is just what is happening and why we need to let go of some people. Right. So, without placement, no, it's about helping redundant employees find alternative work through counseling. Right. So, this can be done through two ways. Number one is through job shops. And number two, outplacement consultancy services. So, what are job shops? So, job shops are not shops. It's more like workshop, for people who are looking for another job. So, uh, this includes helping people to prepare their CVs and help them in their interview techniques, right? And also matching people to jobs and arranging interviews. With outplacement consultancy services, so usually these are third-party organizations who you might want to get services from. And what they would usually do include initial counseling, which would get their basic information and immediate concerns, their achievement lists, their skills inventory, what can they do, their personal statement that they wish to present to the job market, their personal success inventory, what have they achieved, um, three jobs that they might be suitable for, a psychological assessment, development of CV, identify job market opportunities, practice interview, and a job search campaign. So legal framework. So in the Philippines, for example, an employee who has been employed for 6 months or more has the right not to be unfairly dismissed. And complaints would be heard by employment tribunals. So in the Philippines, for example, it's the National Labor Relations Commission. Okay. So legally speaking, dismissal takes place when so this dismissal this is not saying that it's either legal or illegal. It's just saying that these are the ways how dismissal takes place. So, for example, an employee terminates the employee's contract with or without notice because the employee was demoted, was transferred, or was dismissed, was told to that that he is being let go. So that's also dismissal. So, or the employee terminates the contract because the employer has made it difficult for him to work. Perhaps he is being given too much tasks or tasks that he cannot do. So it's also dismissal, no? If the employee resigns because of that. Or the employee is employed under a fixed term contract, which is not renewed. So a contract that is not renewed is also dismissal. So an employee who resigns while under notice following dismissal. So the employee was told that you will be dismissed at the end of the month, and he resigns 2 weeks before that. So that's still dismissal. And an employee who was unreasonably refused work after pregnancy. So they left for 2 months, 3 months for maternity leave, or even paternity leave, and they were not accepted back to work. So that's also dismissal. Okay. So when there is an employment tribunal, two fundamental questions when dealing with unfair dismissal cases. So these are the two questions. Number one, was there sufficient reason for the dismissal? Was it fair or unfair? So number one talks about sufficient reason. Is there sufficient reason for the person being dismissed? And number two did the employer act reasonably in the circumstances, right? So was it reasonable what the employer did? Next, fair dismissal. So these are deemed fair, no? If you are going to be dismissed uh, following these reasons. Number one, incapability. So suddenly you can no longer do the job or the task that you were asked to do because perhaps of health or mental health or physical attributes that you cannot do your job anymore. Number two, misconduct or especially gross misconduct. Right? So you did something that was deemed immoral or just wrong, no, by the organization. Number three, a legal factor that prevents an employee from continuing work, like being imprisoned. Okay. So you cannot work anymore. Okay. Number four, redundancy. So as we have already discussed, it's when your position is deemed to be in excess of what was required. Next is when the employee broke or repudiated his or her contract. So whatever it is that is in the contract that you breached, right? So that's also fair dismissal. So the employee took part in an unofficial or illegal strike. So that's also for fair dismissal or other substantial reason. Okay, so the case-to-case basis, uh, whatever it is, no, sometimes it might be considered fair dismissal. So if those are fair dismissal, what would be unfair dismissal? So this is when the employer has failed to show admissible reasons. So the reasons is not admissible or unreasonable. Right. Next, a constructive dismissal has taken place. What is constructive dismissal? So it's when the employer really tried to make it difficult for you to work there, uh, made your life in the organization uh, unbearable that you just wanted to resign. So that's constructive dismissal. So, or they are in breach of a customary or agreed redundancy procedure. So the organization did not follow the agreed redundancy procedure. So that's also unfair dismissal. So in all these, the burden of proof is on the employer. Uh, so that's why in many cases, uh, the employees, the aggrieved employees, would usually win labor cases because the employer was not able to show proof that they acted fairly. So reasonable circumstances on the part of an employer would be considered reasonable. So what should you do, for it to be considered reasonable? So number one, employee should be informed of the nature of the complaint against them. So if there is a complaint, they have to be informed. The employee should be informed. Next, the employee should be given the chance to explain. So now that they know the complaint, they should be given the chance to explain. Next, they should be given the opportunity to improve. Eh, so, so meaning giving them a second chance. Uh, uh, except no for some gross cases of incapability or misconduct. So there are zero tolerance policies, no, but those cases that are not zero tolerance, perhaps they can be given an opportunity to improve. Next, employees should be allowed to appeal. Okay, so whatever the decision is, they should be given the chance to appeal. Next, they should be warned of the consequences that that might happen, no, if improvements does not take place. If they do not improve, what will happen? Okay. Next, any decision to dismiss should have sufficient evidence. So, as the employer should have sufficient evidence when dismissing someone. Next, take any mitigating circumstances into account. So perhaps sometimes people act because of certain circumstances. For example, it was just an emergency. That's why they did something that was not supposed to be done, or it was a misconduct because uh, the person was uh, not really careful, or perhaps the person was sick on that day. So we don't really know. So take into account the mitigating circumstances. Next, the employer should act in good faith, meaning uh, that the employer did everything it could and is not doing anything illegal, or uh, the employer uh, perhaps is really acting on the dismissal because the person or the employee is really uh, really must be terminated, so should act in good faith. And finally, the offense or misbehavior should merit the penalty of dismissal rather than some lesser penalty. So sometimes, if you are going to dismiss someone, make sure that it's because uh, the that particular misbehavior was due for dismissal, because maybe there should be a lesser penalty that should be given instead of dismissal. Alright. So just be sure, that it's really for dismissal and not some lesser penalty. So how to approach disciplinary cases? So the approach should be governed by three principles of natural justice. So this is how uh, disciplinary cases can be handled justly. Right? So first, let the individuals know the standards of performance they are expected. Right? So be sure that they know the performance standards that they need to achieve, right? And the rules that they have to conform to. Right? So because without them knowing this, it would not be just. Right? Number two, they should be given a clear indication where they are failing or what rules they have broken. So they should be explained to properly and clearly what they failed in and what they broke. And unless it's a gross misconduct, they should be given an opportunity to improve before disciplinary action is taken. So sometimes maybe they were just being careless. So maybe they can still improve, no, greatly, by being given a second chance. So when handling disciplinary action, these are the three-stage approach. So the first stage is informal oral warning. So just tell them, about the complaint, or uh, about what they didn't do properly. Right? Uh, Second are formal oral warnings that may also be made in writing. So these uh these are sometimes more serious, offenses, or perhaps they did something the second time around. Right? Number three, final written warnings. So these are final written warnings saying that after this, it could lead to suspension or dismissal or other penalty. Right? Some organizations would have a hierarchy of offenses, and sometimes certain offenses warrants a final written warning right away. So it depends on the organization. And finally, let's go to retirement. Okay. So when people are retiring, It's a major change and should be prepared for. So if you are in human resources, so these are some of the things that needs to be specified in your retirement policies. So number one, when are people actually due to retire? So when are they officially due to retire? Number two, uh, in on what circumstances can they still work after their retirement date? So in some cases, some people can still work part-time, no, in certain organizations after retirement, right? Or on a consultancy basis. Okay. Number three, if perhaps you would offer pre-retirement training. So what are the trainings that you might offer before they retire to be ready for retirement? And finally, advice to people about who are about to retire. So perhaps counseling, no, on people who are retiring. Right? So yes, so thank you so much. So that's it for release from the organization. So I hope you somehow learned something from the three reports that I have given. So thank you everyone and take care.